So welcome everybody. So now is our senior partner panel, and I have to tell you, so last year when I did Consulting Day, this was definitely in my opinion, one of the best panels and parts of Consulting Day. So really excited to have everybody here. I'm going to do a brief introduction for our moderator, who is Prashant Malavia. Most of you know him. He's an associate professor of marketing here at the McDonough School of Business. He is also a senior associate dean of the MBA program. He joined us in 2008 after teaching at INSEAD, France, and prior to INSEAD, he held an appointment at the University of Illinois at Chicago and a visiting professorship at Wharton as the Titan Industries Professor of the Alba Graduate Business School in Athens. And at Kellogg School of Management, Professor Malavia is a consumer psychologist by training and received his PhD from Kellogg School of Management from Northwestern University. So on that note, let's give a warm welcome to our panelists here as well as Prashant Malavia.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome our panelists. Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure that you all could take the time and spend your valuable time with our students. I'm not going to go into any preamble and jump right into a discussion with all of you. The first thing I'd like to do is to really just go down the row and have all of you introduce yourselves. Tell us where you are, what you've been up to, and what are you doing now, and then I will get into a few questions that I have.
Start. Hello. My name is Kareem El-Alaili. I'm a managing director with Sensio Consulting Group. Sensio is a consulting firm located here in DC, about 2 miles away, right on 14th and H. We primarily serve federal government clients, but we also do quite a bit of higher ed work, including for Georgetown. Quickly, my background, I started out as an IT consultant, moved into strategy consulting, worked for Booz & Company, switched over to a company called Alex Partners, which does a lot of restructuring and bankruptcy. So I was doing, back in the Great Recession 7 years ago, I was working on the big bankruptcies, GM, Delphi, Tropicana Hotels, Rite Aid, Sara Lee. Not all of them went into bankruptcy, by the way. So we did our job right. Right now, about little less than 5 years ago, I had a child, so I decided I did not want to be on the road anymore 5 days a week, so I found a wonderful little boutique firm in Washington, D.C., rolled the dice, took a chance on moving over there, and have been there since, and happily ever after. So I came into that firm as a principal. I moved up into a managing director role. Right now, I'm still in a managing director role, but in my magic time, I have to also operate the company. I am the de facto CIO. I'm the de facto chief strategy officer. I have to wear many hats, as you do in a small company, in addition to staying billable and bringing in the requisite amount of work to keep people paid. So that's a bit about me.
Thanks. John Forsyth. I'm a director at Deloitte's consulting practice. I am a MSB grad from class of 1999. When I was sitting in your seats, I had no idea what I wanted to be. The only thing I knew is that under no circumstances did I ever want to become a consultant. Things changed with Consulting Day. I realized that's what I want to be doing. So I left here in 99. I actually started working with the newly formed PricewaterhouseCoopers. The consulting part of PwC was sold off to IBM in 2002. I left IBM to join Bearing Point in 2004. Bearing Point was acquired by Deloitte in 2009. Today, I run our federal strat change community of practice. We've got around 300 practitioners in our federal practice doing strat change work. I run several projects within our Department of Defense, as well as other initiatives with Department of Commerce and some other federal clients. I'm on the National Strat Change Executive Team as well as Deloitte's Global Executive Team for Strat Change. I lead our human capital recruiting here at Georgetown as well as do some eminence in public speaking. Oh, I'm an adjunct, too, at Georgetown's Masters in Human Resource Management. So here quite a bit.
I'm Sven Dharmani. I'm a partner at EY, focused on performance improvement, supply chain. John and I were actually classmates back in '99, and we weren't in your shoes exactly because we were in Old North. So 2 buildings ago, not even Carbarn, but Old North. But we had some great times being in close quarters. I actually run our supply chain practice globally for automotive sector, and we have about 500 people in that practice across different regions. EY has been rebuilding the consulting business back since 2008. I joined about 2010. Prior to that, I spent about 10 years at Capgemini, also doing supply chain consulting, and I've stayed close to automotive because that's where I started my career, and I've loved the sector. I focus on a host of different clients like GM, BMW, Lamborghini. So I'm involved in running the supply chain aspects of multiple accounts and overseeing projects as well, and building new IP, which is really what differentiates us in the marketplace. So that's kind of my focus.
Welcome. Greg Boyer. I'm a partner with PwC. I help look after our media and entertainment practice in the U.S. for advisory. Similar to some of the backgrounds you heard here, I actually started my career with Booz back in 96, 97, and spent a few years there. Spent a lot of time actually at KPMG Consulting in Bearing Point, so I'm surprised we haven't run into each other in the past. I was there almost 8 years, so both of us probably know quite a few people. I came over to PwC around 5 years ago, and most of my focus is strategy operations with a heavy bend on technology and digital, and the things we're doing in the marketplace to make our entertainment, media, and comms practice successful.
All right, thank you very much. So I think what I would like to explore with you is really two big themes. One is to be able to get a glimpse into the life of a partner. What is it that you do? What keeps you awake? What makes you go to bed? What occupies your mind? What occupies your time? And the second theme I'd like to explore with you is what is the journey in becoming a partner like? What does it take to get there? What is it that you had to do or be aware of? What were the typical milestones or landmines that one should be aware of? So these are the two big things that I'd like to explore and see where it gets us. So maybe we'll start from take turns and start from one side and then the other side. So we'll start with Greg. So can you give us a glimpse into the life of a partner, Greg?
Wow, that could be a long conversation. We were talking earlier. The first feedback I give is being a partner for any of the firms that we're talking about here is a wonderful thing, but it also requires a certain amount of responsibility and commitment. So with that, it's not all glamour all the time. There's a lot of really hard work that goes into what our firms do. I would say first and foremost, the things that I think about mostly, first and foremost, our clients. Second to that, and a very close second, is our people. And lastly, our community and our brand. And all those have their own, very specific role to play. But you have to learn to juggle a lot of hats, and you have to learn to help build practices and build organizations, both for your clients and for the organization that you work for. And that takes a lot of learning over time. It doesn't happen, day one when you walk in. Probably the best advice I can give is I see a lot of folks come into consulting early, and I didn't know that I was going to stay in consulting as long as I have. Quite frankly, I thought I'd do it for 5 or 6 years and then move on to my next conquest. But you get kind of drawn in with how dynamic I think consulting can be in terms of how you learn and the type of work you have. And if you decide to make a career out of it, you're always learning. Even as partners, you're constantly learning even today in terms of working with your clients. So you have to have a very curious mind, I think, and you have to really want to work in a very fast-paced and dynamic area. But learn to flip a lot of plates and have a lot spinning in the air, because there's a lot of stuff always going on.
That's great, Greg. Life of a partner, I think if I have to summarize it in 2 words, I would use intense and fun. Intense because I'm always on. There are so many things that we are focused on. Like Greg said, you're building the practice, you're selling work, you're delivering work, you're overseeing quality, you're trying to build a brand in the marketplace. So it's extremely intense, but it's also, for me, very much fun because I love what I do. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to figure out is, what is it that I want to be doing for the rest of my life? And I think through the consulting days, and I actually didn't intern in consulting during my MBA, I interned at Chrysler, but I discovered that consulting is something that I'm really going to enjoy. So I find it incredibly fun, even though I have to work long hours and I travel, and Monday I'm in Europe, and Tuesday I'm back in the US, and Thursday, I'm in a third city altogether with different set of clients. I really love my interaction with my client, with my team. So I find it incredibly fun building new solutions, being very creative, and you have to take time. So, in that intensity, you have to find some time to be ideating and iterating through solutions, because that's what keeps you ahead of the curve. And you have to keep learning too, and you learn almost every day. So I concur with you, Greg. So in summary, it's very intense because you're doing a lot of different things, wearing a lot of different hats. I can't remember a day in the last year where I didn't have potentially 2 or 3 conflicts on my calendar, at least 2 or 3 conflicts on my calendar. And I had to choose what I had to do. And I had to prioritize. So you learn to prioritize well. So I'm usually in 2 or 3 different cities across 2 or 3 different clients, and I'm probably spending a day, building ideas and solutions, or hiring or recruiting. So that's how I would summarize life as a partner.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And I'll kick it off by saying it's freaking awesome being a partner, all right? It is really awesome being a partner. It's hard to get here, but it's really awesome being a partner. And it's not just because we're paid more. That's fun, too. All right, no question about it. But it's not because of the pay. It's because of the influence you have, all right? The influence you have with your clients, the influence you have with your firm, the influence you have with your people, the influence you have on leaving a legacy is awesome. It's more than I thought I could do when Sven and I were busy shuttling between desks up on top of Old North. I didn't think I would ever have the opportunity to have this kind of influence on the firm of my clients. So as an example, influence with clients, I spoke to, on Monday morning, I spoke to every senior executive in the Department of Commerce. And I was the keynote speaker for this presentation that once a year brings every executive together, and I influenced their thinking. There were 3 or 4 speakers afterwards, and they all referred back to things I was saying. And like, that's cool. That's cool that someone's actually listening to what I have to say. Influencing our people is, I have a chance to hire a lot of Georgetown folks, and seeing them come up as senior consultants and make manager, and go from manager to make senior manager, and seeing them grow. This past year, this was an incredible stat, there were 10 Georgetown advanced degree hires in my practice having babies this year. And a really productive group, it's nice. But it was so nice to see these young people grow up in their families, developing their careers and developing their families. So it's awesome seeing people really succeed. And then having a chance to influence the firm. My thoughts get shaped in terms of how my federal practice runs, how my community practice runs, and how the global firm runs. So that kind of influence is something hopefully people are aspiring to, and it is great. Much like what Greg and Sven were saying, it's busy. I wake up in the morning, I look at my calendar, and then anything happens. It's that kind of, there's no standard day that I have. It's time with clients, time within the firm, time writing, time preparing presentations. It's a multiple set of activities that you're doing, and sometimes you sit back and go, how did I just switch from that to that in my head? I don't know how I did it, but it evolved. It probably wasn't something I could have done just coming out of this program, but through experience over the last 16 years, you evolve to the point where you can do those things and make those switches. That sometimes means that I don't have as much chance to go deep into a single thing, and I miss some of that, but I have teams that can go deep. And now I am just guiding those, whether it's an internal team or an external team. So it's that balance of whether we might still be busy, but we're not going into the level of detail that I might have been doing as a senior consultant.
So I want to second the notion that it is professionally exhilarating to be a director, partner, whatever you want to call it. I wake up every morning. I'm excited to have to build up a practice, to have to grow the company, to deliver great work to my clients. I live and breathe this stuff, but that is also the shady underside of being a partner, is that I live and breathe this stuff 24/7. I wake up in the morning, I look at my iPhone, unfortunately. Last night, I have the privilege or the non-privilege of growing up in this area and rooting for the local football team. So last night while I was watching them get spanked, I still was working the whole entire time. Those are my weekends. My weekends are basically given to when I have any spare time. I'm not really doing stuff for me. I'm spending a lot of that time working, thinking about how I'm going to grow my company, how I'm going to build the next pitch deck, how I'm going to create new intellectual capital, how I'm going to deliver better on the project. So there's a sacrifice there that if you want to be a partner, this becomes all-consuming. It's not a 40-hour-a-week job. It's not a 50-hour-a-week job. I do my work in about 60 hours a week, but the mind share that it takes is a lot more significant than that. So I carve out time for my family, but at the same time, always in the back of my mind, I'm thinking I got to take my kid ice skating, I got to teach him how to play hockey, but can't stay too long because I got to get back and work. So that is the reality of being a partner and an executive in a company.
Thank you very much. If I could dig a little deeper, so if you wouldn't mind reflecting back to a recent success that you've had at work, what is it that took to achieve that success?
Yeah, I can talk about one. So I talked before about influence, right? And so one of my clients is the United States Transportation Command. Anything that moves in the military comes through this command. And they're located at Scott Air Force Base, Western Illinois, around 20 miles east of St. Louis. When we started the project, we were doing really just some basic comms work, but it was different from what they'd been getting before. It was another competitor doing work, and it was the competitor was doing sort of staff aug, and we said, no, we can do this different and play an advisory role, and not just be that sort of master-slave relationship where the client's telling us to do something, we do it. It's how do you play that advisory role? So we get in there and shifted the mindset of the client, and this was a couple of years ago, from being just order recipients to advisors and trusted partners to them. That small team actually began to then grow in terms of not only what they were responsible for, but the size of the team. So now we directly work with the 4-star general. So you look at the order of the chain of command. His boss is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His boss is the president. And so we're working with someone who has tremendous influence over the military landscape. And it became out of small incremental stuff as a trusted advisor and partner, and evolved to being much more of a strategic advisor. And I think that kind of success, I'll take some credit for it, but it was really the team that was there who developed the relationship, and that's so critical to what you're doing, not just being someone who's doing good work, but driving results. We talk about it as issue to impact. What is the impact and value for the client that you're doing? Not just a pretty deliverable, because oftentimes that just goes into a shelf somewhere, but what is different about how they do work there, and our role there helped change the perspective that they see of advisors in such a way that they are now seeking further help in that way.
I can give another example. We recently finished a large transformation at a Detroit OEM, and what it took was a lot of critical thinking, problem solving, connecting dots, and also tap dancing, right? The project started out being sponsored by the Vice President of Supply Chain and Procurement, and it was a global project. The auto industry, as you all know, has gone through a downturn and it's come back, but the capacity hasn't been aligned globally. So we were starting to look at where are they still oversized and where is the supply base at? It took over 100 global interviews. We ran multiple workshops in Korea, in China, in Asia, in North America, and we had to walk a fine line because we had to push hard enough where we are asking the tough questions, but not push too hard where they would actually, the stakeholders would actually shut down and stop talking to us and being honest with us. So it took a lot of tap dancing and connecting the dots, because if you look at any of the big 3 OEMs, they're so big that they don't communicate well within each other. So we became the collaboration hub of getting the information from marketing and sales and tying it to supply chain and saying, how does this really connect? So what we ended up with was coming up with almost $2 billion a year savings value proposition, which we started to implement with them. We did a bunch of proof of concepts, and it wasn't easy. It was pretty hard because there is there is a lot of momentum, right? Inertia, organizational inertia to keep doing what you're doing. And change is hard. I mean, for me personally, change is hard. I want to stay in the same hotel every week if I go to one city. And to change a job is incredibly hard. So we had to be respectful of that. We had to put ourselves in their shoes and try to look at it from their perspective and drive collaboration. So I think you can accomplish a lot, but you really have to understand and be critical, not abrasive, but critical thinking, and try to solve issues that they can't solve themselves. And I think that's what it really takes, because you're coming from an outside, and sometimes the people on the inside can't tell forest from the trees because they've been doing it for so long. And they've only been with one company for 20 years, so they don't know a different way of doing things. And this is where consulting is so rich, because I can take my experience from other clients and apply it to that client. So, the transformations, large transformations, are incredibly exciting, very challenging, but a lot of fun when you look back and say, what journey did we start 2 years ago, and where are we now? And the clients stand back in awe, like we could have never accomplished this, and so it's a lot of fun when you get there, but it's not an easy journey to get there.
So I'll maybe tell a different tact. We recently did a project with NBC News, and the news industry, if you all are very familiar with them, is going through very tough times. It's very difficult to be a traditional news broadcaster today with the likes of Vice and Vox and BuzzFeed. The time it takes to take a story on the internet compared to traditional storytelling, where you'd have a lot of proofing and a lot of ability to have some time to deal with that. So some of the traditional broadcasters like NBC Universal have been trying to act quicker, to collaborate globally around stories and leverage that. Our team built a fairly innovative tool there that we think can help transform the news industry. And what it allows it to do is have real-time storytelling through a collaboration tool across all of the different news bureaus across the world, and then build off of each other and contribute in real time. It's a little more complex than that, but that's the easy solution. But the reason it's really important is our team had to take a huge risk to do that work. It was something that, quite frankly, had not been done before. The client didn't even know if it was going to be successful. And the team was able to take those risks and be bold and create something that is relatively out on the edge, but something that creates huge value for the client. The reason that I mention it, I think you're at a very interesting inflection point over the next couple of years as you look at your career. You probably have the most unique opportunity to take some risks and do some things that you probably wouldn't be punished for as late when you get later in your career. So I would encourage you to don't be reckless, don't be crazy, but think about how you can be innovative. Think about being bold. Think about pushing the limits in terms of getting there, because innovation and being able to drive innovation is really core to all of what our firms are all about. We work with our clients, and you'll have more of an opportunity to do this at this stage of your career and take some of those risks and, quite frankly, fail occasionally, because that actually is healthy too, believe it or not, and not be punished for it.
So Prashant, I was waiting for Karim to go, but please note how we each defined success there wasn't, hey, I sold $10 million or I got this big raise. It was client success. I mean, if you're not thinking in terms of what your client needs, then you're not going to make it to partner. If you're just thinking about what you're getting out of this, that's good, and we encourage that self-development, absolutely. But you've got to be thinking first, what can I do to solve my client's problems and leave them better off than when we started? That's how you define success in your career, and that's how you make it up in your career, is having that external orientation towards the client.
And you're successful when the client starts shilling for you and starts to introduce you to others and doing the relationship building for you.
Yeah. And just to that point, you've created a long-lasting relationship when the client moves from one company to another, and within 30 days you get the phone call and saying, hey, can you come help me out? I'm looking at turning this issue around or this problem around, and I'd love to work with you again. That's when you've really made an impact and left him a lot better and his company a lot better than when you came in and started the work.
I have to say, as a marketing professor, that is music to my ears, that you all focus on your clients. But, one of the other things I think that, would be useful for all of us to hear is, so all of our students are just about to embark on their new careers and embark on this new life. And some of them are aspiring to be, get to where you are. Some of them are trying to think about, is this what life should be for them? So if you can, share a little bit about your journey from, having done your MBAs to where you are today. What did that look like? What were some of the highlights, some of the lowlights maybe? And what does it take to make sure that one continues to persevere through that journey?
So let me start. So I had a very unusual way of kind of backing into my strategy consulting career. I started out as an IT consultant, continued as an IT consultant when I joined Booz Allen, and then decided about halfway through my career there that I wanted to go back to business school and try my hand at strategy consulting. So I did that. I went to business school. As I came out, I kind of reached a fork in the road, and this is, it was one of those big career decisions. I had an offer to go work for Booz in Asia, so doing a lot of work in Thailand, Australia, and I knew that this was the best thing for my career. It was not the best thing for me personally and my family. I had to make a decision on what to do. My wife and I had just taken in our godson. He was 5 years old at the time. He wasn't doing very well, so for me to leave was a very big decision, but I actually made the decision to leave, and I promised my wife that, you let me do this for, 6 to 9 months, and I will never do it again, but it'll be a career-enhancing move. So, she blessed it. I went over there. I had a great time. I learned a lot. Came back and realized that, I cannot live overseas away from my wife and family, so found a job in the States, but then it opened me up to new opportunities. So I started working for a company called Alex Partners. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Alex Partners. Some of you will, but it's kind of the stealth company that operates in the background, and it does a lot of restructuring and a lot of mergers and just behind-the-scenes stuff for private equity companies and bankruptcies and stuff like that. And I got a job working for them, and I busted my tail, and I moved up the chain, and made a lot of sacrifices, but learned a lot professionally. That's really, that's a decision that each one of you are going to have to make, is what is the balance between sacrifice and your personal life, whether it's your family or like personal ambitions or aspirations that you have. I had a very supportive wife, who, by the way, was a CEO of a significantly sized nonprofit in D.C., so it's not like she was at home, taking care of children. She was just as busy as I was, but she was very supportive of my career. I was able to ride that momentum, and slide over to Sensio a few years ago and kind of continue that trajectory. But the message that I want to impart on you is that there is sacrifice. You guys will reach forks in the road where you have to make decisions, and you just, Godspeed that you make the right decision and the best one for you.
Yeah, and I think you'll probably hear a theme here, too, of you're all in a position where you want to perfectly craft out the next phase of your life. And good luck with that, because it's not going to happen, okay? But it does come down to knowing yourself as much as possible, and when those decisions present themselves to you, making a decision with some rationale behind it, all right? So I talked before a little bit about my career. I came to Georgetown not wanting to be a consultant, because the perspective that I had of being a consultant was being on the road 100% of the time. And I had just gotten married. We were planning to start a family, and that's not the life I wanted to live. I realized that I could get the best of both worlds by being here in D.C. and working for the federal government. But my career before Georgetown was at a commercial bank, and I was a corporate trainer. Guess what my first project was after business school? After investing all that money and all this time, I was a trainer on my first project. And that was purposeful, because consulting was new. Federal government was new. The firm I worked at was new. There was enough new going on that at least I had something that I could hold on to as a foundation, and that was the experience that I brought to Georgetown prior as a trainer. So my first project was around trainer because my resume could speak to that, and we could sell my resume to the client in a way that it was credible. That was getting my foot in the door. From then on, I expanded. So I haven't done training in 14, 15 years. I've done much more of a strategic advisory role, strategic change management, executing large projects. So that being said, understand what you bring to the table. Understand what you want to do. One of the things we ask all of our consultants is, look at your week's calendar. What are the things you're looking forward to doing? What are the things that energize you? What are the things that as you're doing it, time flies by? What are the things that when you're done with it, you might be tired, but you're not drained? And then also look at the flip side of that. What are you looking for? What on your calendar do you dread? What are the things that while you're doing it, it feels like a lot longer than it does actually take? Understanding those things, what strengthens you, what weakens you, what energizes you, what de-energizes you, understanding that will get you a better sense of what kind of work you want to be doing. For as much as possible, you want to be spending more of your time doing those things that strengthen you, and then come up with mitigation strategies for those things that de-energize you. So understanding that about yourself and making those decisions will help you craft the path going forward. And whether it's Kareem, myself, or anyone up here, it's all about how you made those decisions for yourself. Mine was a career going through mergers and acquisitions, so sometimes the decision wasn't made for me. I was acquired and not making a decision to leave. But understanding what works, what kind of culture you can work within, what kind of environment you want to be around, what kind of team you want to be a part of, understanding that about yourself is going to help you make better decisions that are the big ones in your career.
One of the things I started to do right at the beginning of my career was really take charge myself. And I made a couple of missteps right in the beginning. And I started out with PwC. I think we were actually hired together. I decided I wanted to go into commercial. I didn't enjoy federal as much, so I switched. And I switched probably at the worst possible time I could have. And it cost me maybe a couple of years in my career because I couldn't have gotten a promotion and then moved, but I just jumped because I was taking charge, and I made a mistake and I learned from it. But the one thing I always did was I kept control of where I wanted to go. Along the way, I probably had to take some detours, but those were all conscious because I always had for myself, where do I want to be in 3 years? And there were times, like when we were going through recession or September 2001, when the market just completely tanked, I made conscious choices that I'm going to take a detour because that's a safer route. That's a lower risk route that still gets me to my goal in 3 years, but it's a slightly longer path. So take charge, and you can't have a too long-term plan because things will constantly evolve. Nothing plays out exactly as you want it, like John said, but have at least a 2-year plan or a 3-year plan, which acts like a North Star for you. So when you make decisions, you're evaluating not by what do I want to do or where am I for the next 6 months, but what does this do to my 2 or 3-year plan? So my journey to partner was interesting. I had probably 1 or 2 missteps, but I had a lot of exciting things and experiences along the way and long-lasting relationships that I've created. It's a big industry, but believe it or not, it's a small world. And I continue to work with the same set of people. So one of my guiding principles has been, always to end a relationship with a client or a colleague on a good note. And that's come back and helped me over and over again. So the journey becomes fun when A, you're having fun with what you're doing, B, you kind of have a North Star, and you'll take a detour here and there, but you're heading in general in the right direction. And then reward yourself, right? Reward yourself for success. As you have little successes, I would take big overseas trips. I mean, my wife and I went over to Asia for 5 weeks, and that's unheard of in consulting, but we did it because, it was a big accomplishment for me, and I wanted to celebrate it. And when I was switching over to EY, one of my criteria was, I love racing cars, so I want to have 15 weekends in a year between March and October where I don't want to work. So I reward myself, all summer by racing cars and having fun. So you got to have, you have to have, I'll say, a reward and satisfaction that comes with the incredible amount of hard work and intensity you put in, and that's what makes life a lot more fun, a lot more livable, and the journey exciting. So that's kind of a little bit of my journey.
I would encourage you to have an outlet similar to what was discussed. Anything that you do that you bring great enjoyment from, work is great, but you got to unplug and get away from that as much as possible, particularly in the kind of fast-paced environment that we all work. You just got to turn your mind off every once in a while. My path to partner was, at least by my standards, pretty interesting. I grew up in a family. My father's a submariner and a nuclear engineer. My uncle's a mechanical engineer. My brother's a chemical engineer. And business was kind of like viewed as like voodoo. Let me get this straight. You go out and you help people figure out what the heck they're going to do, right? They probably still feel like that, actually, if the truth be told. But it was really, a path. I didn't have a plan. I'd be the first to admit that. My plan was to go and work for a couple years and learn as much as I could and develop a plan from there. I never viewed consulting, I think I said this earlier, as really a long-term option. And then the more you work, at least for me, the more I worked in it, the more exhilarating, the more demanding, the intellectual challenge of it. And something that hasn't really been mentioned here is really flexibility. The flexibility you have working in this industry is probably, bar none, about as great as you're going to get in any really big company, both within the company you work in most cases, as well as outside that company. For the most part, most advisory and consulting organizations are very large matrices. And if you want, working in operations and you think that, organizational people change is really where you want to go, there's every opportunity for you to go pursue that within that organization. And likewise, if it's M&A work, you have to prove yourself. You've got to build credibility. You've got to build your own personal brand. You have to associate with the partners that work in that practice and have them want to bring you into their practice. But you have that opportunity within a company to structure your career in any different path that you so choose. And even if you decide that consulting is not what you want to do, you have a lot of flexibility there too, because you're gaining tremendous experience, an experience that is really highly valued in the marketplace. It also provides flexibility in terms of how you take care of your work-life balance. We've talked a lot about the demands of work, which I think is absolutely true, but you also have the flexibility to do lots of things. Early in your career, you have an opportunity to travel, see a lot of places, to meet a tremendous amount of people, to balance your schedule based on what, and how you see fit. So there are some flexibility and some advantages there. And when it really comes right back to it, it's your career, it's in your hands, it's a white sheet of paper, what do you want from it? And I think consulting organizations or advisory organizations or professional service organizations are wonderful places to do that.
Thank you very much. I know we have only about 10 minutes left, so we can open it to the audience to ask questions. Yes, please. So anyone has questions, please raise your hand. Somebody will come with a mic, or are we shouting out the questions? Okay.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much. It was a pleasure listening to you. My name is Tamna, and I'm first year here at Georgetown. You and everyone else tell us about these wonderful projects you've done, very successful ones. I want to hear about a failed project where you were not able to achieve your goal and why you think that was.
Who failed up here? Anyone?
Yeah.
So I'm biased here, but my background is strat change, getting leaders aligned, getting management to support initiative, and getting the workforce on board with whatever you're trying to do through momentum building. And a lot of what I preach to our clients is so non-intuitive. The skill sets needed to lead from an executive position are often opposite what you needed as a manager to drive a project, right? You can't push from on top because anything pushed from on top is going to be resisted. You can't communicate from on top by itself because anything coming from the executive is going to be seen as out of touch. So you got to be able to figure out how do you lead without directly pushing on a project. So I won't go into the client's name, but there are certain clients that just won't get that, all right? They won't get that what has made them successful, what got them to here, won't get them there. And so for the ones that get it, I call them enlightened clients. It's great to work with because they hear what you have to say and they'll take your advice and they will reshape the way they think about leadership in such a way that they can actually be successful across an enterprise as opposed to being successful driving a unit. And so there have been initiatives where we have been paid a lot of money, where we had everything set up with the technology and the structure and the process, but the client wouldn't change leadership styles, wouldn't work to get others on board, try to push it themselves, and a lot of that investment went down the drain because the initiative wasn't successful. It didn't sustain itself. It had a little blip and then went away.
Yeah, I've had the same issue with clients to the point that, I was brought into a client a few years ago at a strategic level and to help them with their IT strategy, and they really only used us for tactical day-to-day stuff. And I was unable to convince that client that you really need to be thinking big picture here before you start tackling the bottoms-up tactical initiatives, and it just wasn't working. And so at the end of the day, we kind of shook hands and walked away. I told him, I can't charge you what I charge you. What you need is $100 per hour kind of staff augmentation person. This is not working. This is not in your best interest. It's not in the government's best interest for us to continue doing this. So let's just part ways. And he yelled at us for a bit and then said thank you. So that's how it goes in the government sometimes.
And sometimes projects fail because of us too. And I'll give an example where it was a large project, and we didn't have the right resource mix. We thought we had picked the best people, but we had picked best individuals. They did not go through storming, forming, norming, and get to performing. There was so much conflict within the team that we couldn't get them to a peak performance. And that's a really important part of consulting is, you don't do a project by yourself. You'll typically do projects in a team anywhere from size of 2 to 50, right? The team won't be 50, but there'll be different work streams. In this case, it was actually a pretty large team of about 12 people working together on one work stream. And the work stream just didn't take off because there was so much conflict, and we picked the best people, but we didn't pick the best team. So it's not always because of the client. It's often or sometimes because of us as well. And the lesson learned was, for me specifically, was scale the team slowly. Don't put 12 people in a room all at once because you have to start the project rapidly. Scale up. So you give the teams a little bit of a chance to form and norm, rather than sort of create cliques within a team of 12. So that's another example where we didn't succeed. What we ended up doing was going back and saying, look, we need another month. In order to make this work, we need another month. And we took the hit, and we kept the team on for another month to make sure we deliver. And we actually scaled the team back. So I relieved 4 team members from the project. And with a smaller team, we were actually able to get it done.
Hi, David Liu, first year full-time. Again, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate your time. Recent years, we have seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the consulting industry, like Integrate for EY and Booz for PwC. I wanted to see, from your point of view, what is the strategy behind these mergers, and what would you see in 5 years the industry of consulting goes?
I'll start and we can move from there. So we've acquired over 80 firms globally, actually, at PwC over the last 5 years. Part of it's part of both, inorganic and organic growth strategies, but it's also was done in a very articulated fashion in terms of how we wanted to build our business. And I think all of the firms here have probably made, or most of them have made, niche and tuck acquisitions where they wanted to pick up things that they, found extreme value, had to move fast, want to add it to their portfolio. It's going to be different for every firm because every firm has a little bit different strategy, a little bit different, component. For us at PwC, we were building a complete strategy through execution capability. I'll talk a little bit about Booz & Co. You know, Booz & Co. was the last piece or the most significant piece recently in terms of being able to add to that. And what it allows us to do is not only focus on, you know, one element of a transformation with a client, but to fully work with them over a long period of time from a strategy through execution. But we've also made some smaller acquisitions that people may not be aware of, like BGT Partners, which is a digital agency, and SciView, which is in social media. We built up our analytics capabilities with Diamond Management Consultants. We built up our supply chain capabilities with PRTM. So we had to become very adept at acquiring and being able to move companies in, assimilate that culture, and take a best-of-breed approach within to make us stronger, as opposed to let any of that derail us, quite frankly, because if you look over the history of professional services, mergers have not gone so hot. You know, knock on wood, but we've had, you know, some very good success with that in the last 5 years. But they come with their challenges, and they're difficult, but they can add a lot to your portfolio and add a lot to your brand. And for us, it was a very deliberate strategy in terms of how we're going to grow our business.
Yeah, and let me add to that. And much like what Greg was talking about, you know, Deloitte's acquisition strategy is very much looking at, all right, what can we do, what can we expand inorganically? So, for example, we wanted to expand our strategy, so we acquired Monitor. We wanted to expand our benchmarking, so we acquired Burson. We wanted to expand our leadership development, so we acquired Kaizen. So there's things that we look at ourselves and realize we can grow that organically by hiring and using our current methods and tools, but there's other things out there that we can add to our portfolio. Much like to what Greg was talking about, integrating those firms is really critical. I told you about all the M&As that I'd gone through. One of the M&As that I went through, I left after a year and a half. By 4 years after the acquisition had occurred, 91% of the people in the acquired part of the organization had left. And it was cultural differences that created it. You kind of think, well, consulting is consulting, but it's not. You've got to understand the cultural differences between those organizations, because every single person that's acquired can walk out that door tomorrow if they wanted to. Right? Some of them get golden handshakes and are stayed for a little while, but you know, as soon as that is up, they can walk out the door. There's very little hard and fast infrastructure. It's all services in the minds of the individuals. So building a culture that welcomes those people in, shares their expertise and differences, and integrates that into the firm carefully is so important, because otherwise much of the value gets lost.
And I can speak really fast to the strategy consulting market. There has been a change in the last 10, 15 years in the strategy consulting market, in that a lot of big Fortune 500 firms have built their own in-house consulting practices. So all of a sudden the mix of what a McKinsey, a Bain, a BCG, or even a Booz & Co. used to do, it used to be 60, 70%, you know, real strategy stuff. Now that number is down to about 30 to 40%, depending on which company. So the differentiation, these companies are not as differentiated as they used to. The strategy work is still going to the same kind of big three firms for the most part, but they're not able to fill their books entirely on doing strategy. So you're seeing some of the consolidation happen. I can say this because I'm a Booz & Co. alum, but I think Booz & Co. lost a little bit of its luster. It ceased being viewed solely as a strategy consulting firm, became a prime target for whatever you want to call it, buyout or eventually takeover. So I think that's the dynamic that's going on in the strategy consulting industry, and that's why there's been a lot of movement over the last 5 or so years.
The other thing which drives the activity is looking forward and saying, you know, what's happening to consulting industry? What is it going to look like in 5 years, right? So, you know, if I look back, 10, 12 years ago, a lot of the work, specifically on the technology side, is now done nearshore or offshore. So will consulting move to a model like Uber, where you have consulting on demand, right? There are a lot of freelance consultants who are available with deep expertise, and they are available on demand to clients, right? So you kind of have to look forward and say, where is the industry going? What are the disrupting factors that are coming, and use that to figure out, where do I need to have acquisitions? Where can I grow organically and create new capabilities versus where do I want to develop rapidly and grow that? So, we do acquisitions as well, but those are mostly tuck in. And I think what you'll see is the consulting industry probably in 10 years is going to look significantly different from what it does today. That's for sure. And I think really that's going to define what the landscape looks like. Is it Big Four? Is it Big Ten? We don't know. Wish we had a crystal ball.
Well, I'm sure there are many, many more questions. I know I have many more questions, but unfortunately we are out of time. I hope you will continue to engage with our esteemed guests, but please join me in giving them a round of applause.